The Galactic Military Academy's Omega Prime station floated in the void like a chrome cathedral, all gleaming surfaces and impossible angles that made human eyes water if you stared too long. Which, frankly, was probably the point. Before we begin, YouTube shows me that 93% of you haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing is free, it really supports our community, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Nothing quite said, "We're more advanced than you," like architecture that violated basic geometric principles. Lieutenant Commander Jamie Westbrook stood at the viewport of Classroom Delta 9, watching a supply freighter dock with all the grace of a drunk elephant attempting ballet. The ship's pilot was clearly Gorillian. Only they could make a routine docking procedure look like an act of divine intervention was required just to avoid catastrophic hull breach. 30 credits says they scraped the docking ring, muttered a gravelly voice behind him. Jamie turned to find Instructor Gorvex lumbering into the classroom, all 8 feet of scaled, prehistoric-looking authority. The Saurian's reputation for turning promising cadets into whimpering masses of self-doubt was legendary throughout the academy. His teaching philosophy could be summarized as, if you're not questioning your life choices, you're not learning fast enough. "No bet," Jamie replied, turning back to watch the freighter's hull kiss the station with a shower of sparks. "I've seen better parking at a demolition derby." Gorvex's throat rumbled. What passed for laughter among his species, though it sounded more like a garbage disposal eating cutlery. "Speaking of demolition, how's your batch of misfits coming along? Last I heard, half your class was filing psychological trauma reports." "Only half? I'm slipping." Jamie grinned, checking his chronometer. 5 minutes until chaos began. They'll be fine once they stop thinking every training exercise is designed to actually kill them. "Isn't it, though?" Gorvex settled his bulk into a reinforced chair that groaned under his weight. "Half the species in this galaxy wouldn't survive their own homeworld's equivalent of a camping trip. These soft shells need toughening." The door hissed open, admitting the familiar controlled chaos of students filing in for advanced combat simulation. Jamie watched them settle into their stations, a menagerie of fur, scales, chitin, and crystalline structures that represented 23 different species, all united in their shared desire to not embarrass themselves in front of their instructors. Glix, the mantoid, folded his serrated limbs with mechanical precision as he powered up his workstation. His compound eyes reflected the holographic displays in thousands of tiny rainbows. Next to him, Rumble, whose actual name was an unpronounceable sequence of geological grinding sounds, shifted his rocky hide and caused minor seismic tremors in the floor. Swoosh, the Avari, preened her iridescent feathers nervously while her talons tapped out an anxious rhythm on her desk. She was brilliant at aerial maneuvers, but tended to panic in ground-based scenarios, which was unfortunate, considering today's lesson plan. And then there was Whiskers. The Velothi cub sat in the front row, barely large enough to reach his workstation's controls. His silver-gray fur was perfectly groomed, his pointed ears constantly swiveling to track every sound in the room. At roughly equivalent to a human 10-year-old, he was the youngest student in Academy history, a prodigy whose test scores had shattered records across multiple disciplines. He was also, Jamie had noticed, completely terrified of making mistakes. "Attention! Future casualties!" Jamie called out, and the chatter died instantly. Today, we're going to explore everyone's favorite topic: not dying horribly in hostile environments. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the classroom. Jamie activated the main holographic display, which shimmered to life, showing a frozen wasteland that would make an Arctic explorer weep. Survival tactics in extreme environments, he continued, gesturing to the ice-covered hellscape. Specifically, how to not become a popsicle when your ship crashes somewhere that makes vacuum look cozy. Swoosh's feathers ruffled. Instructor Jamie, what if we're from desert worlds? Some of us have never seen frozen water outside of beverages. Then you'll learn fast, or you'll learn dead. Jamie's tone was cheerful, which somehow made it more ominous. The galaxy doesn't care about your climate preferences. Hostile is hostile. He began walking between the workstations, hands clasped behind his back. The scenario is simple. Your transport suffered catastrophic engine failure and crashed on Kepler 438 EC, a charming little ice ball where the average temperature hovers around -50 degrees Celsius. The atmosphere is mostly methane and nitrogen, and the local wildlife considers anything warm-blooded to be a delicacy. Whisker's ears flattened against his head. The cub's breathing had quickened, and Jamie made a mental note to keep an eye on him. Velathi were naturally anxious, and the young ones could spiral into panic attacks if overwhelmed. Your survival depends on 3 factors, Jamie continued, beginning to pace: shelter, heat, and not becoming something's dinner. Oh, and you have whatever's in your emergency kit, plus whatever you can salvage from the wreckage. Questions? Glix raised one serrated appendage. What kind of predators are we dealing with? Jamie's grin turned predatory. The kind that think you're crunchy and good with ketchup. Ice bears, frost worms, and my personal favorite, shadow stalkers. Imagine a wolf crossed with a nightmare, given stealth capabilities that make professional assassins jealous. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Whiskers was now visibly trembling, his small hands gripping the edge of his workstation. Activation in 30 seconds, Jamie announced, moving to the control console. Remember, the pain inhibitors are set to 15%, so you'll feel enough to learn, but not enough to require actual medical attention. Probably. Gorvex's rumbling chuckle filled the pause. I love watching the soft ones realize they're about to suffer. Psychological conditioning through controlled trauma, Jamie agreed. It's like therapy, but with more hypothermia. The countdown timer appeared in the air above their heads, numbers glowing an ominous red. 20 seconds. Whisker's breathing was becoming irregular. Instructor? The cub's voice was barely above a whisper. Jamie glanced over. The young Velathi's pupils were dilated, his fur standing on end. Classic signs of panic onset. Just breathe, Whiskers. Remember your training. You've got this. 10 seconds. The room filled with the low hum of the holographic generators spinning up to full power. Live scenario activation in 3, 2, 1. The classroom vanished. In its place, a frozen wasteland materialized around them. The temperature plummeted. Artificial wind howled across simulated ice, and somewhere in the distance, something large and hungry roared its displeasure at the universe. Welcome to survival training, where the only guarantee was that everyone would question their career choices before the day was over. And that was before things went sideways. Jamie surveyed his students as they stumbled through the first minutes of the simulation. Most were handling the transition reasonably well. Glix had immediately begun scanning for shelter sites. Rumble was testing the structural integrity of nearby ice formations, and Swoosh had taken to the air for a reconnaissance flight. But Whiskers was frozen in place, hyperventilating as snow began accumulating on his silver fur. Time to see what human instincts could teach a classroom full of future galactic officers. The Arctic simulation hit like a sledgehammer made of liquid nitrogen. One moment, the students were sitting in a climate-controlled classroom. The next, they were standing in a howling wasteland where breathing felt like inhaling razor blades dipped in antifreeze. Jamie watched his students scatter like startled prey animals, each responding to the environmental shock in their own species-specific way. Glix's compound eyes were already scanning for structural weak points in the ice formations. Rumble had planted himself near what appeared to be the wreckage of their simulated transport, his crystalline hide shimmering as he analyzed the salvageable materials. Swoosh had immediately taken flight, her aerial reconnaissance instincts kicking in despite the buffeting winds that threatened to turn her into an oversized snowball. Her voice carried over the howling gale as she called out potential shelter locations. But Whiskers was having what humans would clinically term a complete meltdown. The Velothi cub stood motionless in the swirling snow, his silver fur already accumulating a fine layer of frost. His breathing had shifted from rapid to irregular, each exhale creating small puffs of vapor that dispersed instantly in the artificial wind. His pupils were dilated to the point where his normally bright amber eyes looked almost black. "Breathe, Whiskers," Jamie called out, his voice carrying easily across the simulation. "Remember your environmental adaptation protocols." The cub's ears twitched at the sound of his instructor's voice, but he didn't move. If anything, he seemed to shrink further into himself, his small frame shaking with more than just cold. Jamie frowned. This was beyond normal stress response. The kid was genuinely terrified. "Instructor Jamie," Swoosh's voice cut through the wind from above. "I've located what appears to be a cave system approximately 200 meters northwest, suitable for temporary shelter." "Excellent reconnaissance, Swoosh. Everyone, begin moving toward—" "Wait!" Gorvex's gravelly voice boomed across the simulation. The Saurian instructor had been observing from the control booth, but now his tone carried the sharp edge of authority. "The Velothi is exhibiting panic behavior. Protocol dictates immediate extraction from the simulation." Jamie glanced up toward the observation area, though the swirling snow made it difficult to make out Gorvex's massive form. "He's fine, Gorvex. Just needs a moment to adapt." "Look at him, Jamie. That's not adaptation. That's shutdown. Remove him from the exercise before he injures himself or compromises the learning environment for others." The other students had begun to gather, forming a loose circle around their frozen classmate. Glix's mandibles clicked nervously. "Instructor, should we assist Whiskers? His core temperature appears to be dropping rapidly." And that's when it happened. Without warning, without any of the careful calculation that normally preceded his teaching decisions, Jamie found himself moving toward the paralyzed cub. But before he could reach him, Whiskers moved first. In one fluid motion that seemed to bypass conscious thought entirely, the small Velothi launched himself forward. His powerful hind legs, designed for climbing the massive trees of his homeworld, propelled him through the air with surprising grace. He landed squarely on Jamie's shoulder, small claws finding purchase in the fabric of the human's uniform. The entire simulation seemed to pause. "What in the name of—" Gorvex's bellow of outrage began to echo across the frozen wasteland. "Student Whiskers, disengage immediately!" The Saurian's voice cracked like a whip. "Unauthorized physical contact with instructional staff is a Class 3 violation." Jamie felt the small body pressed against his neck, trembling with more than cold. Whiskers had buried his face against Jamie's shoulder, his breathing gradually beginning to slow. The cub's claws weren't painful, more like a cat seeking security than an attack. The simulation continued around them. Wind howled, snow swirled, and somewhere in the distance, one of the programmed predators let out a bone-chilling howl. But the classroom had gone completely, utterly quiet. Every student was staring, not at the frozen wasteland surrounding them, not at the various survival challenges they were supposed to be addressing, but at their human instructor standing calmly in the artificial blizzard, with an alien cub clinging to his shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the universe. Instructor Jamie. Glix's voice was barely audible over the wind. What? What do we do? Jamie adjusted his stance slightly, compensating for the additional weight, and continued as if nothing unusual had occurred. What you do, Glix, is exactly what Swoosh suggested. We move toward that cave system. Northwest, 200 meters. But? Rumble's geological grinding voice expressed confusion. The Velothi is learning, Jamie finished. Same as the rest of you. Now, who can tell me the three most critical factors for establishing shelter in sub-zero conditions? The students exchanged glances. Whiskers remained motionless on Jamie's shoulder, but his breathing had steadied. His small hands, paws, had relaxed their death grip on the uniform fabric. Thermal retention, Swoosh ventured from above. Good start. What else? Wind protection, Glix added, his compound eyes still tracking between Jamie and the cub on his shoulder. Structural integrity of the shelter materials, Rumble contributed, though he sounded distracted. Excellent. Now, let's put theory into practice. Swoosh, maintain aerial reconnaissance, but stay within communication range. Glix, I want you to analyze the cave entrance for structural weaknesses. Rumble, start cataloging salvageable materials from the transport wreckage. Jamie began walking toward the cave system, his movements careful and measured to avoid disturbing his unexpected passenger. And everyone, keep your heads on swivels. Those predator sounds aren't just atmospheric decoration. From the observation booth, Gorvex's voice continued to thunder across the simulation. This is completely inappropriate. Protocol clearly states. Protocol, Jamie called back, not breaking stride, also states that we adapt to changing conditions and prioritize the welfare of all personnel. Whiskers is safe, he's learning, and the exercise continues. As they moved across the frozen landscape, something interesting began to happen. The other students, instead of focusing solely on their individual survival tasks, began unconsciously forming a protective formation around Jamie and Whiskers. Glix moved to take point, his natural predator awareness scanning for threats. Rumble positioned himself to block the worst of the wind. Swoosh adjusted her flight pattern to provide overhead coverage. None of them discussed this tactical adjustment. It simply happened. Instructor, Whiskers spoke for the first time since the simulation began, his voice muffled against Jamie's shoulder. Why aren't you following the extraction protocol? Jamie's steps didn't falter. Because, sometimes, the best way to face your fears is with backup. How are you feeling now? The cub was quiet for a moment, considering. Less scattered. The cold doesn't seem as threatening. That's because you're not facing it alone anymore. Your body temperature is being supplemented. Your stress response is regulated by proximity to a calm presence, and your cognitive function is improving as panic recedes. Is this how humans handle crisis situations? Jamie chuckled, the sound carrying clearly in the thin air. Kid, humans are basically walking anxiety management systems. We're social pack hunters who evolved to keep each other alive through cooperation and stubborn refusal to give up. When one of us is in trouble, the rest of us instinctively move to help. They reached the cave entrance, a dark opening in the ice that promised shelter from the relentless wind. Glix was already inside, his natural echolocation mapping the interior structure. Clear of immediate threats, the Mantoid reported. Structurally sound, extends approximately 30 meters into the ice formation. As they entered the relative warmth of the cave, Whiskers finally lifted his head from Jamie's shoulder. His amber eyes were clearer now, focused rather than dilated with panic. "Instructor Jamie?" "Yeah. I think I understand now. The lesson isn't just about individual survival." Jamie smiled, reaching up to steady the cub as he prepared to climb down. "Oh, what's the lesson then?" Whiskers looked around at his classmates, who had all unconsciously arranged themselves in a defensive perimeter around their makeshift shelter. "It's about how survival becomes possible when you're not trying to do it alone. Now you're getting it." But as Whiskers prepared to climb down from his perch, the simulation's ambient lighting flickered ominously. A warning klaxon began sounding, not from the programmed environment, but from the Academy's actual emergency systems. Jamie's blood ran cold as he recognized the pattern. That wasn't a simulation alert. That was a real malfunction alarm. And they were all still trapped inside the holographic environment with safety protocols that were about to become very, very real problems. The malfunction alarm wasn't supposed to sound like that. Jamie had heard enough emergency klaxons during his military service to know the difference between a drill, a minor system hiccup, and the kind of alert that meant people were about to die. This one fell squarely into the third category, a discordant wailing that seemed designed to reach directly into your brainstem and activate every panic response your species had evolved. Around him, the cave simulation flickered like a dying light bulb. The walls phased in and out of existence, revealing glimpses of the actual classroom beyond, before snapping back to frozen stone. The artificial wind stuttered, creating an eerie silence that somehow felt more ominous than the howling gale. "What's happening?" Swoosh's voice carried a tremor that had nothing to do with cold. Jamie's mind raced through possibilities, all of them bad. Holographic projectors weren't supposed to malfunction catastrophically. They had more safety redundancies than a nuclear reactor. But when they did fail, the results could range from mildly disorienting to actively lethal, depending on how the safety protocols collapsed. "Whiskers," he said quietly, "I need you to climb down. Now." The cub, who had been clinging more loosely since his panic subsided, immediately tightened his grip. "But you said—" "I said you didn't have to face things alone. I didn't say you had to physically attach yourself to me when things get dangerous." Jamie's tone was calm, but carried an undercurrent of steel. "Down. Trust me." Reluctantly, Whiskers climbed down from his shoulder, dropping to the cave floor with feline grace. The moment he was clear, Jamie was in motion, his relaxed instructor demeanor evaporating to reveal something harder underneath. "Everyone, sound off. Status report, now. Glix, operational, but experiencing visual distortion from projection instability. Rumble, stable, but detecting structural anomalies in the environment matrix. Swoosh, airborne systems functional, but navigation references are unreliable. Whiskers, present and confused." The cave around them continued to flicker, and Jamie could see the real classroom strobing through the failing projection. But something was wrong with that view, too. The lights were flashing red, and he could make out Gorvex's massive form hunched over control panels that were sparking ominously. "Instructor Gorvex!" Jamie called toward the observation area. "What's the situation?" The Saurian's reply came through the comm system, crackling with static. "Complete holographic array failure. Safety protocols are not responding. attempting manual shutdown, but the system is locked in active mode. And that's when things went from bad to genuinely terrifying. The simulation didn't just malfunction, it escalated. The temperature, which had been uncomfortably cold but manageable, plummeted beyond anything the original program was supposed to generate. Ice began forming on the student's skin, not the simulated discomfort of the training program, but real crystalline structures that could cause actual frostbite. Worse, the predator sounds that had been distant atmospheric elements suddenly became proximate and urgent. Through the flickering walls of the cave, shapes moved in the swirling snow, shapes that were larger and more aggressive than anything in the original program parameters. "This is impossible," Glix chittered, his compound eyes tracking movement outside their shelter. Holographic constructs cannot generate actual thermal effects or physical contact. "Tell that to the ice forming on your carapace," Jamie replied grimly. He was already moving, his mind shifting into a mode that his students had never seen before. Taritiber, casual, slightly sarcastic instructor, vanished, replaced by someone who moved with predatory efficiency. Listen carefully, all of you. The simulation has become a genuine survival situation. The environmental effects are real, the threats are real, and the danger is real. We are no longer in a classroom exercise. He paused at the cave entrance, scanning the corrupted landscape beyond. Which means we're going to survive this the way humans have survived every impossible situation for the last 200,000 years, by being too stubborn to die and too smart to give up. Swoosh landed heavily next to him, her feathers already showing signs of ice accumulation. "Instructor Jamie, how is this possible? Holographic projectors can't create matter or energy beyond safe parameters," Jamie finished, "under normal circumstances. But when the safety systems fail and the projectors are drawing power directly from the station's main reactor instead of regulated training supplies, the energy output can become problematic." A roar echoed from somewhere uncomfortably close, followed by the sound of something large moving through snow. "We're trapped in a holographic environment that's drawing enough power to simulate actual environmental conditions," Jamie continued, his voice remaining steady despite the circumstances. "The cold is real because the projectors are actually manipulating local temperature. The predators are real because they're solid light constructs with enough energy to cause physical harm." Rumble's crystalline structure chimed ominously as ice began forming along his edges. "How long can we survive in these conditions?" Jamie considered. "At current temperature drop rates? Maybe 20 minutes before hypothermia becomes critical for most of you. Less if those things out there decide to visit." From the comm system, Gorvex's voice crackled. "Manual shutdown failed. Control systems are completely unresponsive. Requesting emergency technical assistance." "How long for technical assistance to arrive?" Jamie called back. "Minimum 30 minutes. The cave fell silent except for the artificial wind and the increasingly close sounds of predatory movement. Simple mathematics. They had 20 minutes to survive in conditions that would kill them, while waiting for help that wouldn't arrive for 30 minutes. "Well," Jamie said conversationally, "this is what we in the human military used to call a character-building exercise." Whiskers looked up at him with wide amber eyes. "What do we do?" Jamie's expression shifted into something that would have been perfectly at home on the face of humanity's ancient ancestors, the ones who had looked at a planet full of creatures bigger, stronger, and better armed than they were, and had somehow decided to make it their home anyway. "We do what humans do best, kid. We improvise, we adapt, and we overcome. But first, we get creative with the resources we have. He turned to address the group Glix. You said the transport wreckage had salvageable materials. What exactly did you catalog? Emergency thermal units, structural support components, and what appeared to be emergency rations. Rumble, how stable is this cave structure? Surprisingly robust. The ice formation appears to be reinforced with metallic compounds, likely from the simulation's attempt to create realistic geology. Swoosh, aerial reconnaissance. I need to know what we're dealing with out there, but stay high and keep moving. Don't let anything get a lock on you. As his students moved to follow orders, Jamie's mind raced through tactical possibilities. Standard Academy training emphasized following established protocols and waiting for extraction. Human military training emphasized the fine art of turning impossible situations into merely improbable ones. Whiskers, he said quietly, kneeling to bring himself to the cub's eye level. I need you to do something that's going to feel scary, but it's important. Can you handle that? The young Velothi nodded, his earlier panic replaced by determination. Your species has the best hearing in this group, and your size makes you harder to detect than the rest of us. I need you to be our early warning system. Can you position yourself near the cave entrance and listen for anything approaching? What if something finds me? Jamie smiled, and there was something reassuring in the expression despite their circumstances. Then you call out, and I deal with it. That's what pack leaders do, kid. They handle the threats so the rest of the pack stays safe. As Whiskers moved to his assigned position, Swoosh returned from her reconnaissance flight, landing with obvious relief to be back in relative shelter. Report, Jamie ordered. 3 distinct entities moving through the storm. Quadrupedal, approximately twice the size of Instructor Gorvex, with what appear to be adaptive camouflage capabilities. They seem to be hunting in coordinated patterns. Pack hunters, Jamie murmured. Of course they are. Because why should anything about this situation be simple? Glix returned from the wreckage with an armload of salvaged equipment. Emergency thermal units are functional but limited power supply. Maybe enough for 6 hours of operation at minimal settings. How minimal? Enough to prevent hypothermia, but not enough for comfort. Comfort is a luxury. Survival is a necessity. Jamie began sorting through the salvaged materials with practiced efficiency. Rumble, I need you to modify the cave entrance. Narrow it down so only one of those things can approach at a time, but leave enough room for us to retreat deeper if necessary. Understood. As his students worked, Jamie found himself thinking about the fundamental differences between human and alien approaches to crisis management. Most galactic species had evolved in relatively stable environments. They developed sophisticated technologies and complex social structures, but their crisis response protocols were built around the assumption that help would always be available. Humans, on the other hand, had evolved on a planet that had spent millions of years trying to kill them in creative ways. Their crisis response protocols were built around the assumption that help probably wasn't coming, and if it was, it would arrive too late to matter. Whiskers! The cub's voice was barely above a whisper. Something's coming. Jamie was beside the cave entrance in 3 quick strides, motioning for the others to continue their preparations while staying quiet. Through the swirling snow, he could make out a shape moving with predatory intent. Large, powerful, and heading directly for their shelter. Options? He whispered to the group. Thermal unit could be weaponized, Glix suggested quietly. Overload the power cell, create explosive discharge. Structural collapse could block entrance, Rumble added, but would trap us inside. Aerial distraction, Swoosh offered. Draw it away from cave. Jamie considered each option, weighing risks and benefits with the cold calculation of someone who had made similar decisions before. But there was another option, one that none of his students would think of because their species hadn't spent millennia learning to turn disadvantages into tactical advantages. Or, he said quietly, we invite it in. The looks his students gave him suggested they were beginning to question his sanity. Hear me out, Jamie continued, his voice barely audible over the wind. It's hunting in a coordinated pack, which means it's intelligent. It's also operating in conditions that are hostile to us, but natural to it. Fighting it on its terms, in its environment, with its advantages, is a losing proposition. So, we changed the terms. The shape outside was getting closer, and Jamie could see details now that he really didn't want to see. Multiple eyes, predatory grace, and size that made Gorvex look like a house pet. Rumble, can you create a controlled structural collapse? Something that would block the entrance after the creature enters, but before its pack mates can follow? Theoretically possible, but timing would be critical. Glix, how big an explosion can you create with that thermal unit? Sufficient to damage or disorient a large creature, but probably not enough to kill something that size. Don't need to kill it. Just need to convince it that we're more trouble than we're worth. Jamie's smile was the kind that had once convinced saber-toothed tigers that maybe they should find easier prey. Swoosh. When this starts, I need you airborne and ready to provide tactical support. Whiskers, you stay behind Rumble. He's our best protection against physical attacks. The creature was almost at the cave entrance now, its multiple eyes reflecting the strange light of the malfunctioning simulation. And remember, Jamie added conversationally, we're not trying to win a fight. We're trying to survive long enough for help to arrive. Sometimes the best way to do that is to convince the universe that humans are too crazy to mess with. The predator's shadow fell across the cave entrance. Showtime. The predator that stalked into their cave was the kind of nightmare that evolution designed when it was feeling particularly vindictive. 8 feet of muscle and malice, covered in adaptive camouflage that shifted between snow-white and shadow-black as it moved. 6 eyes arranged in pairs along its elongated skull tracked independently, giving it a field of vision that encompassed nearly everything in the cave simultaneously. But what made Jamie's blood run cold wasn't the creature's size or its obvious predatory adaptations. It was the intelligence in those alien eyes. This wasn't some mindless holographic construct operating on basic programming. Whatever the malfunctioning projectors had created, it was thinking, learning, adapting. Now, Jamie whispered. Rumble shifted his crystalline bulk, and carefully calculated stress fractures appeared in the ice ceiling above the cave entrance. Not enough to collapse immediately, but enough to create a controlled avalanche when triggered. The predator's head swiveled toward the sound, multiple eyes focusing on the geological disturbance. For a moment, it hesitated, clearly intelligent enough to recognize a trap when it saw one. That moment of hesitation was all Jamie needed. Glix lighted up. The mantoid's compound eyes flashed as he overloaded the thermal unit's power cell. The resulting explosion wasn't particularly large, but in the confined space of the cave, it was devastating. Light, heat, and concussive force erupted in a sphere of controlled chaos that would have sent any sane creature running for safer hunting grounds. Unfortunately, as Jamie was beginning to suspect, this particular predator hadn't received the memo about sanity. Instead of retreating, it lunged forward with speed that defied its size. Jamie threw himself sideways, shouting, "Collapse it!" as he rolled away from razor-sharp claws that left furrows in the cave floor where he'd been standing. Rumble triggered the structural collapse, sending tons of ice crashing down to seal the entrance. The predator was trapped inside with them, but its packmates were locked out, exactly as planned. What Jamie hadn't planned for was how fast the creature could adapt to changing circumstances. The predator spun toward Whiskers with predatory focus, clearly identifying the smallest member of the group as the easiest target. The young Velothi froze, his amber eyes wide with terror, as death approached on 4 powerful legs. And that's when something fundamental shifted in Jamie's demeanor. The careful tactical planning, the measured responses, the controlled leadership, all of it vanished in an instant, replaced by something far older and infinitely more dangerous. Humans might have evolved sophisticated brains and complex social structures, but underneath all that civilization was a predator that had once hunted megafauna across continents with nothing but stone tools and absolute refusal to give up. Jamie moved, not with the measured precision of an instructor or the calculated efficiency of a military officer, but with the explosive violence of a species that had climbed to the top of the food chain by being too stubborn to know when they were outmatched. He hit the predator in a flying tackle that would have impressed a professional wrestler, driving it away from Whiskers and into the cave wall with enough force to shake ice from the ceiling. The creature was larger, stronger, and better armed, but Jamie had 2 advantages it couldn't match: opposable thumbs and a willingness to do absolutely anything to protect his pack. The fight that followed wasn't elegant or tactical, it was brutal, desperate, and entirely too close for comfort. Jamie used every dirty trick human evolution had provided: leverage, joint locks, pressure points, and the fine art of turning an opponent's size against them. When claws raked across his arm, he grabbed the creature's limb and used its own momentum to throw it across the cave. "Swoosh!" he shouted, while grappling with something that was trying very hard to remove his head. "Aerial support! Keep it distracted." The Avari took flight in the confined space, diving and swooping around the predator's head, her talons striking at its eyes whenever it tried to focus on Jamie. It wasn't enough to cause serious damage, but it was enough to prevent the creature from bringing its full attention to bear on any single target. Glicks! Another thermal unit. Power cells depleted. Then get creative. The mantoid's compound eyes flashed with inspiration. Instead of trying to create another explosion, he began using his natural echolocation as a weapon, generating subsonic pulses that interfered with the predator's sensory systems. The creature's movements became erratic, its coordination disrupted by the sensory assault. Jamie used the opening to execute a move that would have been impossible without years of military training and a complete disregard for personal safety. He vaulted onto the creature's back, wrapped his arms around its throat, and began applying pressure to what he hoped were the appropriate arteries. "Rumble! I need a way out of here. Working on it." The crystalline being was already examining the collapsed entrance, calculating stress points and structural weaknesses. But the predator wasn't finished. With a twist that nearly broke Jamie's ribs, it threw itself backward against the cave wall, trying to crush him between its bulk and the unforgiving ice. Jamie held on grimly, knowing that letting go meant death for all of them. "Whiskers!" he gasped. "The emergency kit!" "Medical supplies!" The young Velothi moved with surprising speed, rummaging through the salvaged equipment. "What am I looking for?" "Sedatives." "Anything. Marked for emergency medical use." Whiskers emerged with a pressure injector, the kind used for emergency medical intervention. Without hesitation, he scampered up the struggling mass of predator and human, found an exposed patch of the creature's hide, and triggered the device. The effect was almost immediate. The predator's movements became sluggish, its coordination deteriorating as alien biochemistry succumbed to galactic-standard medical compounds. Jamie maintained his hold until the creature collapsed, unconscious but breathing. Only then did he release his grip and roll away, breathing heavily and assessing the damage to his person. "Is everyone intact?" he asked, checking his students with the methodical thoroughness of someone who had just realized how close they'd all come to becoming exotic alien cuisine. Glix, functional with minor damage to external carapace. Rumble, operational and working on exit strategy. Swoosh, airborne systems nominal, but experiencing fatigue from extended flight in confined space. Whiskers, present and amazed. Jamie looked around at his students, really looked at them. They were battered, exhausted, and probably traumatized, but they were alive. More importantly, they had functioned as a unit when everything went sideways. "Nice work, everyone. Especially you, Whiskers. That sedative injection probably saved all our lives." The young Velathi's ears perked up with pride, but then his expression grew thoughtful. "Instructor Jamie, why did it target me first?" "Predatory instinct. You were the smallest, appeared most vulnerable." Jamie paused, considering his next words carefully. "But appearances can be deceiving. You proved that today." A grinding sound from the collapsed entrance announced Rumble's success in creating an escape route. Fresh air began filtering through the opening, carrying with it the blessed absence of predatory howls. "Structural integrity restored," Rumble reported. "Exit is secure." As they emerged from the cave, Jamie was relieved to see that the holographic simulation was finally beginning to destabilize completely. The frozen landscape flickered and faded, replaced by the familiar walls of classroom Delta 9. Emergency lights cast everything in red shadows, and the air was filled with the sound of technical crews working to restore normal operations. Gorvex was waiting for them, his massive frame radiating a mixture of relief and professional concern. Behind him stood Dr. Mullins, the Academy's chief medical officer, ready to assess everyone for injuries. "Report," Gorvex demanded, though his usual gruffness was tempered by obvious worry. "All students accounted for and functional," Jamie replied formally. "Minor injuries, no serious casualties. The simulation malfunction created genuine environmental hazards, but we adapted and overcame." Dr. Mullins began his medical assessments, running scanners over each student in turn. Mild hypothermia exposure, some minor lacerations, elevated stress indicators across the board, but nothing requiring intensive treatment. But it was Whiskers who spoke up with the observation that would change everything. "Dr. Mullins, I have a question about Velathi behavioral patterns." The human medical officer looked down at the young cub with professional interest. "What kind of behavioral patterns?" "When I climbed onto Instructor Jamie's shoulder during the crisis, it felt familiar. Not like something I was choosing to do, but like something I was supposed to do." Dr. Mullins's scanner paused over Whiskers, and his expression shifted to one of fascination. "Interesting. Your stress hormones show a pattern I haven't seen before. Glix, would you mind if I scanned you as well?" The mantoid submitted to the examination, and Dr. Mullins's fascination grew. "Rumble? Swoosh?" After scanning all the students, the doctor turned to Jamie with an expression of scientific wonder. "Commander, are you aware that you've triggered a cross-species pack bonding response? Their biochemistry shows adaptations I've never seen before. Stress reduction through proximity, enhanced cooperation instincts, Protective behavioral modifications. Gorvex's throat rumbled thoughtfully. Explain. It appears that human protective instincts are contagious, for lack of a better term. When Commander Jamie accepted Whisker's instinctive bonding behavior instead of rejecting it, he activated dormant pack survival protocols in all the students. The Saurian instructor's multiple eyes focused on Jamie with new interest. Is this common among human instructors? Jamie shrugged, still processing the day's events. We tend to adopt anything that needs adopting. It's kind of our thing. At that moment, the classroom door opened to admit a group of figures that made everyone straighten to attention. 3 Velothi adults entered, their silver fur marked with the intricate patterns that denoted elder status. The largest, a female with distinctive frost-white markings, approached with fluid grace. "I am Frostpaw, of the Velothi Council of Elders," she announced, her voice carrying formal authority. "We have come to address the inappropriate behavior exhibited by young Whiskers during today's training exercise." Jamie felt his protective instincts flare again. With respect, Elder Frostpaw, Whisker's behavior was exemplary. He showed initiative, courage, and peace, human. The Elder's tone wasn't hostile, merely thoughtful. "We are not here to punish. We are here to understand." She moved to stand before Whiskers, studying the young cub with ancient eyes. "Child, describe what you felt when you sought contact with the human instructor." Whiskers' ears flattened nervously. "It felt like finding pack. Like being safe in a way I haven't felt since leaving the homeworld." The second elder, a male with silver-striped markings, stepped forward. "Silverstripe, also of the council. Human Jamie, are you aware of the significance of what you have witnessed?" "I'm beginning to suspect it's more important than I initially realized." Frostpaw's expression held something approaching reverence. "For 3 generations, we have believed the ancient bonding behaviors of our species to be extinct. The ability to form pack bonds with non-Velothi, to find safety and strength in multi-species cooperation. This was thought lost when we left our homeworld for the stars. But today," Silverstripe continued, "this human has awakened something we thought was gone forever." The child's instincts recognized a true pack leader, someone worthy of trust and protection. Gorvex's rumbling voice carried a note of amazement. "Are you saying that Commander Jamie has accidentally recreated ancient Velothi social structures?" "Not accidentally," Frostpaw corrected, instinctively. "Humans, it seems, carry within themselves the ability to form the kind of bonds that our ancestors knew, bonds that cross species barriers and create genuine cooperative units." Dr. Mullins looked up from his readings with excitement. "The biochemical evidence supports this. All the students show enhanced stress resilience, improved cognitive function under pressure, and increased willingness to take calculated risks for group benefit." The third elder, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "I am Storm Whisper. I represent the Galactic Defense Council's Special Operations Division. Commander Jamie, would you be interested in developing new training protocols based on today's discoveries?" Jamie looked around at his students, his pack, he realized. They were all watching him with a mixture of hope and determination that made his chest tight with emotion he wasn't quite ready to examine. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Multi-species integration training," Storm Whisper replied. "Teaching other instructors how to activate the kind of cooperative responses you achieved today. The galaxy faces threats that require unprecedented levels of coordination between species. Your methods could save countless lives." Whiskers looked up at Jamie with bright amber eyes. "Does this mean we can continue learning together?" Jamie reached down and scratched behind the cub's ears, a gesture that would have been unthinkable in a formal academy setting just hours earlier, but now felt as natural as breathing. "Kid, I don't think they could separate us now if they tried." Gorvex's rumbling laughter filled the classroom. "I retract my earlier assessment of your teaching methods, Commander. Unorthodox, perhaps, but effective." As the elders departed to begin formal discussions with Academy administration, and Dr. Mullins continued his fascinated analysis of cross-species biochemical bonding, Jamie found himself standing in the middle of a classroom that no longer felt like just another assignment. It felt like home. And Whiskers, now serving as unofficial ambassador between his species and the strange human who had accidentally revolutionized galactic military training, settled onto his favorite perch, Jamie's shoulder, and began planning lessons that would teach the galaxy what humans had always known. Sometimes the best way to survive isn't to be the strongest or the smartest or the most technologically advanced. Sometimes the best way to survive is to be too stubborn to abandon your pack, and too protective to let anything threaten your family. Even when your family happens to include a dozen different species, half of whom you couldn't pronounce the names of a week ago. Especially then.